Hi. We're going to we're blasting it right now. So we're just trying to get it as well as possible right now. Shut it down.
That sounds good. Excuse me. I was just getting through over here.
Oh, sorry. Check, 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 check.
Find out about the microphone.
Careful. The mic that was being used is the little one in the black one. This one wasn't doing anything.
Oh,
But now it is. That's all it was. Like everyone was hearing me talk because I was sitting there, and then no one could hear because that was all. But the thing is, I'm recording everything on the laptop instead of so I have no idea what happened there, but now it's working.
I don't like Mr. Gates.
And get this, we have a sound system.
Oh! Whoa! Very, very lucky. It's very hard to find people who are great teachers. I don't know about you, but I'm really good. And I can name 8 or 9 who were like, but most people don't have that. By the time I realized how life-changing those people were, we were past thank you. Really sad. You taught me how to parse a sentence.
Ninth grade English teacher. Must have been well over 60. Yeah. Terrified. She's talking a sentence that.
The ninth grade teacher, in my case, had been there. Father his last year. Old man. My God. He started off by saying, gentlemen, you think you would come here to get an education. In the first place, I would fail anyone on any composition the word get. The sentence as a word. In the second place, becoming educated will give you the tools to educate yourself from a lifetime. And having said that,
Rethinking what I might read. So I keep rethinking what I might read something. Conversation.
by the way, since your thought was, if I were king of the world, I would make it. Tell them. Must be read, must be. You read very well, and you read very well.
Since we only have the one speaker and it's over there, you want to sit over on this side, be right in front of it. You're gonna be listening through this podium.
She's really good.
I know. It is
The teacher.
it's a talent that a lot of people strangely do not have.
Just like she was trying to get her notes in order, and
Gosh, we might have to put a few more chairs in.
doing that.
We'll just wait. I mean, it's. Wait.
Are you uncomfortable with the velvet?
You need to sign one. No, I don't think I need to be here. My husband has my dad. Sending me texts.
What's your return? with your 13-year-old trial.
Oh, yeah. She tries to keep to herself. So, you know, all the years.
And then they come out from behind. What they say is that you have not had all the forget about it. Peer pressure.
Oh, I'm sorry. More recent.
Despite the fact that she's gone silent. Talked about something today. My wife was 6:30, something like that. Oh, right out of bed. Night shift. She liked working the night shift. She could be here when we drive around and they right here. He was 42 years old. Her mom was 7 or 8.
At this moment.
Well, greetings, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to start right on time pretty much because we have such a great audience tonight. I'm so glad to see so many people. We were, I think, a little bit underpopulated last month, and I was kind of disappointed. This is going to be a great reading, and we're very excited about it. We also have an audience on the internet, on YouTube Live, and I hope that all that sound is working. We had a little trouble this morning at the workshop, but anyway, fingers crossed. This is the 729th meeting of the Poetry Society, and what I like to do is talk about what was going on with the Poetry Society 100 years ago this month. Unfortunately, this month is weird for the 1925-1926 season didn't start until October, so they weren't doing anything right now in September. But I did want to talk about a couple of things. One is that for this calendar year, 100 years ago, Tom Waring was brought in. He had already been president once before. He took a year off. They brought him back in again. He was the editor of the Post. But he was the editor of the Evening Post. That was it, since 1897, and he did it right up until his death.
in 1935. He lived at 25 Lambeau Street, which is just south of Broad from here. And he had that house built. This is very interesting. He was the chair of the Board of Architectural Review for many years. But in 1912, before that was all enacted, he had a house that was built in 1815, torn down on Lambeau Street, and where he built his brand new house. They reused the bricks and as much wood as they could from the old house to build his. It is said, I'm not sure if this is true or even verifiable, but that house that he built is reputed to be the last load-bearing brick house built in Charleston. If you go back in the 1800s, load-bearing bricks means that the entire wall is brick, and some of these big houses that might be 3 feet thick in brick. And then by the end of the 1800s, they were going to what we have now, which is brick veneer, just a brick on the outside, a wooded house on the inside. So anyway, that's an interesting thing. It is an unpleasant looking house. If you ever go by it, the styling is really, really weird. It is not an attractive house, but he died in that house in 1935 at the age of 63. Interestingly enough, because later on the Evening Post and the Charleston Daily Courier came together to be the Post and Courier, and then later the News and Courier. William Watts Ball, who was the editor of the Courier, was also president of the Poetry Society later on in the 30s. So, what else am I going to tell you? Oh, so when Tom Waring gave his opening remarks at that October meeting, he talked about poetry had been on a decline, and it really was. It was very popular when the poetry was founded 5 years earlier, but it was a fad basically, and it was also part of the time people had just gotten out of World War I, and they had just gotten through the influenza epidemic, if they were so lucky to get through it, and a lot of art just burst forth all over the world. There was some great art in that post-war era, and a lot of people became interested in Poetry Society, and there was the Poetry Society just right at the cutting edge of that, all these people coming together and enjoying poetry. Well, poetry is a gateway drug to writing novels. And so a lot of the members and the founders turned to writing books. By 1925, that's when Porgy came out, DeBose Hayward's book, which was later, turned into Porgy and Bess the opera. And there were a whole lot of novels that would come out of the Poetry Society in that era, after 1925. So Tom Waring mentioned that. He said, it seems like nobody's interested in poetry. Maybe we should do a writing group for prose, for stories and books. I don't know if that ever happened. I don't think so. But it is kind of a natural progression. I think a lot of poets turn into novelists. And our own, she's not here tonight, Linda Annis Ferguson has a novel out. And it is her first, and she has been a poet for a long, long time. And so it is still going on today, this transition from poetry to prose. That is all I wanted to say, and we're going to start things out with door prizes. So in honor of Thomas Waring, I really admire Thomas Waring. He's one I've labeled, there's a few saviors of the Poetry Society, people who really came along at the right time and saved the Poetry Society. And Tom Waring was one of those people. And he did it at great personal loss. And he was the editor of a newspaper, and he was working practically full time trying to keep the Poetry Society alive for the 6 years that he was president. So it's kind of amazing. And he worked himself to death, basically. He found out he had heart disease like about a couple of years before he died, and he just kept on working and keeled over in 1935. But in honor of him, the door prizes are, you're going to see Tom Waring or Thomas R. Waring on your board list on the back. If you are a winner, look at the bottom, it'll say Hospitality Tom R. Waring, and if it doesn't say that, you did not win, but if it does, we got 1, 2, where's the third? We've got three winners. The bottom of the list, Hospitality Thomas R. Waring. Anybody else? I know it's got to be out there. I put them towards the top. Okay, that's all right. All right. All right, we got 3 books you get to choose. Other than the Nobel Prize, you can get some poetry. Okay. And Susan? All right. That means Leo, it's that one. Yeah, I want to see you win a Nobel Prize. Okay, so Robin is going to start things off with the introductions.
Warning everyone about all the wires. I'll trip over them, probably. Hi, welcome. I'm so glad to see you here tonight. I invited everyone that was at the bar when I was having dinner over, but none of them came, so I'm glad you did. Jacquelyn Markham is a friend. I know her through the Pat Conroy Literary Center. We met a long time ago in Beaufort, and she's very active in the Beaufort poetry community. And so when I was scheduling all of this business, I thought you should meet her. And if you take a look at if you haven't read the bio, she has 3 chapbooks. One is called Rainbow Warrior. One is called Peering into the Iris. And hang on, I'm missing one.
I only put 2.
Oh, you only put 2.
The iris is
And the
personal mythology.
okay.
I didn't go-
Yeah, she does what I will call, because I'm not an academic and she's a doctor and all that. She does some weird stuff, especially like with mythologies, and not necessarily mythologies with which you will be familiar. So I find her stuff fascinating that way. She's a lot of fun. And I'm just not going to read the rest of this because it's already in the program. But she is starting a workshop, I think, a regular workshop in Beaufort at the Pat Conroy Literary Center. So if you ever are like floating that way, she's a lot of fun to take workshops from as well. I've done a couple of hers. And she always wears the coolest flowy things when she's being a poet. So welcome, please, Dr. Jacquelyn Markham. Because she's also short.
I'm short. I do have heels on, but I'm short. Thank you, Robin. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the Poetry Society for inviting me tonight and to kind of kick off our second event for the season. And also thank you to all of you for coming, the appreciators and the poets and the writers. And we wouldn't be here without the appreciators, and I appreciate you being here. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from my new chapbook, which is Rainbow Warrior. And that's the title poem, Rainbow Warrior as well. My other chapbooks are much earlier, and I didn't put them in the bio, but this one just came out in 23. Rainbow Warrior, as some of you probably know, is the name of a ship that Greenpeace uses for a variety of activities. And in this case, it was to rescue people from the islands in the South Pacific after their home was contaminated with nuclear testing and radioactivity. It's also a myth that is attributed to the Cree Indians that a A rainbow warrior is going to come down from the sky and save us from extinction, those of us who are still here on Earth. And it has a dedication, rainbow warrior. Well, I did want to show you this. I use these images of the rainbow warrior with permission from Greenpeace. For the people of Ranjalap, leaving home on the Rainbow Warrior, escaping radioactive fallout from nuclear testing. Rainbow Warrior cradles the ones from Ranjalap, tossed in the night's black sea, lulling sea, a lullaby in night's indigo sky. Moon's bright beam washes white. The bow that plunges low reaches high to glittery skies. The mast punctures the dark seal of sky, releases bits of salted air to taste on tips of tongues, wind weaving wisps of hair, a magic web of sleep, draping shoulders like nets of fallen stars. Rainbow warrior cradles the ones from Ranjalap until a rainbow arcs the morning sky, breaks into a million tiny colored beads, bounce on ocean blue, splash on lashes of Meja and Mejo. Children waking now with sunlit tears, wondering where are our beds, wondering where this big ship goes, and never looking back to Ranjalap, mothers, fathers, elders, children, wondering why this morning it is raining tears and rainbows. I couldn't help but compare that to the recent news of the Guatemalan children that were disappeared in the night and taken off into planes, but I guess they turned them around. But I always try to think of the impact on the children and on the people and individually, humanity, those who are impacted by these big political moves like the United States testing nuclear bombs on the South Pacific Islands, including Bikini Atoll. That's how this book started, and it was a 30-year work, and finally I said, let's just put this together with some other poems and move it forward. And so that has a couple of other themes besides the Bikini poems, that is the Bikini Atoll Islands. And that is more about the, of course, eco-poetry, about nature and the beauty of nature, but what we do to it with also with fossil fuels and that kind of thing. I'm going to read one last one out of that later. But I want to just throw in a couple of new poems. This one is called Mother of the Marsh, Aisling. And those of you who are poets probably know that an aisling is an Irish dream poem. And in the poem, the land appears personified as a woman. So this one is about Mother of the Marsh. And I'd like to dedicate this to Jeff Evans, who was the publisher of the Low Country Weekly in Beaufort and who passed away suddenly last week because it did win first place in their poetry contest. And I have a letter from him in my journal now when he gave me the award. The marsh can swallow like quicksand. Never fear, she whispers as she rises from the mist above the muddy marsh, a presence out of nothingness and my dreams. She speaks, I am the mother of the marsh. She is dark like the earth and her scent like the sea. She's the spirit of the river and flows with the tides. I'm in awe, so I don't speak back. She doesn't mind. She has things to say and raises her voice above the wind. My spartina grasses bind my muddy soil to protect you humans from stormy seas. I'm a shelter for the terns on their long migration. Ducks and cormorants love to stay with me and nest. As if she senses my fear of quicksand, she warns, stay away from my pluff mud at low tide, and I will soothe your soul with my shimmering waters by moonlight and sunlight. She recedes then into the rising mist. I breathe her salty air, and she clears away my woes. I want to read one other new poem, and this one did receive honorable mention in the Oliver Bowman Memorial Award. It's called I Knew Before I Knew. And I wrote this from a prompt during April when I do the Poem a Day Challenge, which I always do. And we were to address something or someone. So I'm addressing the lily of the valley. White boughs of the lilies of the valley spill fragrance heavy into spring air. I love the very shape and scent of your melody of blossoms that seeks the cool shade. I love the delicacy and rarity of you. I love that you were my mother's favorite flower and the flower for May, the month of Beltane and her birth. Yet the lily of the valley's very fragrance breaks me in two, allows no comfort, though I remember I loved to lie in the thick grass and lily patch as a child, perhaps thinking at such an early age that I had already passed away, like a kitten of mine had when the dog caught her between its sharp teeth. I didn't know yet about my mother's early death, but I felt the loss before its time, when the scent of you, lily of the valley, covered my soul like a blanket of ecstasy. And the book that was confusing to Robin, this is a personal mythology peering into the iris. So irises and lilies of the valleys, we're talking today at workshop about memories of place, and these were all around my childhood home, and so they're important in all my work. And this is a hybrid work. It has photographs and artwork of my own and poetry and prose. And an epigraph by my favorite poet, Hilda Doolittle, also known as H.D. Irises. Take me home where canals flow between iris banks, H.D. I peer into this iris mother, center deep with violet, down to succulent stem, entrance to earth, nourishment, blue perfume, floats to summer days, Michigan cool. Iris bed, lily of the valley sweetness, shadows on the north side of the house, years old mountain of forsythia bush, lush under the secret dome of branches, yellow flowerets, light interiors of spring, change now to a summer cave of moss, black earth, and silence for a child alone. Where were they all, the children, taking naps at school, leaving only you and me? You left me to myself, in my haven, feeling you there. From window looking out, buffalo grass, my pillow, thick and cold, only one jet stream, cutting azure sky in an entire afternoon. A clatter of plates would wake me, kitchen bright and steaming, reaching out, I would come to you, lily of the valley bouquet, an offering, damp fragrance of irises in my hair. So that sort of shows my age, because there was only one jet stream. Now I live in Beaufort and there are jets. I want to close with a poem that I feel that literally took me 12 years to write. And it's a short poem. To me, it is about creativity. And since we have a creative crowd here, it's called Full Moon. Round, drum-tight belly, embryonic tides, ebb, flow. The moon ripens as the Navajo waits for its pull. In the rainforest, the moth orchid accepts the random moth, if not broken by wind or rain, in its year's slow opening. And I, like the moth orchid, Open my petals to the moon. Tides swell in me. I wax. I wane. She gives birth. The orchid blooms. My child self takes form. Ink flows like blood. Tides turn. Moon sets. The horizon pushes the sun out to the red sky. Thank you.
I love your imagery. It's always so pretty. Our next speaker is our featured speaker tonight. And she happens to be the Poet Laureate of Georgia. So I thought I'd just take this opportunity to mention that we don't have one here. Do with that what you will. We haven't had one for 5 years. And it's my understanding that there are names in front of our governor. Yeah. So if you want to say anything about your role for the state of Georgia, because we miss having one. This is Chelsea Rathburn. She's the author of 3 full-length poetry collections, most recently Still Life with Mother Knife. But I hear today, Broken Houses. See, I knew I was going to get that wrong. I have a very bad brain. Broken Houses is coming. And it sounds fascinating. For those of you that missed the workshop, what a foolish decision you made, because it was quite amazing. I wrote 2 poems in Washington Park while I was waiting to come back here. Yeah, they're crummy right now, but I'm very slow. But just the exploration of the whole idea of home and what home is and what you remember from home. And, I started the brainstorming that she offered in the beginning and decided that maybe I need therapy. And, it's just really what a workshop should be and what poetry should be. It's a look in, it's a look out. It is so much and it's so rich. And she offered us many poems today, some of which were very familiar to me and I taught for years, and some that were ones I just met. And they were all so rich and wonderful, and I can't wait to go home and read them and look at them again. So you missed out. And what that tells me that isn't really in the bio that gives you, all of the information about Chelsea is she's probably a banging professor. Because, I taught for a long, long time, and it's always great to see somebody that works with a group of people and gets their minds going the way she got mine going today, and I would imagine everyone else's. So I can't wait to hear her read, and I think you're going to really enjoy this. A poet laureate from a state. Imagine that. The jewel of Georgia, Chelsea Rathburn.
Oh my goodness, I had forgotten that there was no South Carolina laureate.
Yeah, we missed Marjorie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, she's wonderful. Well, I believe that there is not currently a United States poet laureate. So, funny thing. Yes, I will get closer to the mic. Is this better? Can you all hear me? Turn it up. How about much better? I can hear it now. Great. Okay, so thank you so much to Jim and to Robin and to Jackie for reading with me. And thank you all for being here. We had a terrific workshop this afternoon. Where did Robin go? There you are. I am so excited to hear that you wrote in the time. That's fantastic. Okay. So as Robin mentioned, I have a new book that's coming out in roughly a year. And so I'm in a strange place right now because I want to read new poems and I want to read older poems. So I'm going to do a few poems from a few different books. It's what I'm thinking of. So I am going to read, this is a collection called A Raft of Grief. And it is a book that begins with the end of one marriage, and then it ends with the beginning of a second marriage. So it ends in divorce and despair. And then eventually my current husband likes to say that, this new wonderful man enters the picture and saves the day. But I wanted to read the title poem, which is called A Raft of Grief. The short version here is that my ex-husband, we separated, he moved out of my house. And the very next day, the IRS sent a letter saying that we owed $10,000 in taxes. It turned out to be a mistake, but the burden of proof was on us. And I was talking to somebody about this, and they said, "Oh, how are you holding up?" And I said, "Well, the IRS and the husband." And this person said, "Well, wow, that sounds like a raft of grief." Immediately, being a poet, an image went through my mind, and I thought of a boat, and I thought, if only. So this is one of the few poems I've ever written that felt like it wrote itself. But it begins with an epigraph for the Morris Dictionary of Word and Phrase Origins, which says, "The raft that means a great number is not related at all to the raft that carries people or their possessions in the water. The two words are homonyms." If only there were a boat, low and long and loaded with all we brought or built, the fatal inattentions, anxieties and ticks that time had sanctified, our good and bad intentions, rages, lapses, and aches. If only it were that easy to stand only ankle deep in the sullied water, hoisting our shared cargo, sinking no further beneath its weight. If only the boat did not need a rower, we'd push it off together, then wade to opposite banks, absolved at last, forever, buoyant, watching it go. And this is a poem I think is a little funny, also about the divorce. We're sort of looking back on this failed early relationship. And only thing I think you need to know here, there are several references to classic rock in this poem. It's called The Talker. It's about eavesdropping. The Talker. The details of his story aren't the point, nor is the listener, who looked as bored as we, two accidental eavesdroppers in a London restaurant. The point is, well, his point, which after 10 long minutes, he came to abruptly and with a flourish, saying slowly and in perfect seriousness, "All we are is dust in the wind. All we are is dust in the wind." I think we bit our fingers to keep from laughing. I know we mocked him through Paris, Barcelona, Rome, and even years later, when one of us became a little too serious, the other would turn and quote his quote again, jabbing the air as he had jabbed the air. I picture him still sitting in some cafe, proclaiming we were always born to run, or urging wayward sons to carry on the way we tried to carry on, the couple at the next table who couldn't help but listen with so little of our own to talk about. And then I think I'll read one more from this book. All right, we're talking a lot about childhood memories and landscapes today. So I'll read this. Is completely self-explanatory. It's called Fire Ants. It takes place in Jacksonville, Florida, 1983. I was a child. And for those who pay attention to these things, this is a sonnet. Squatting in the coppery mud of the drainage ditch behind my cousin's house, we searched for fish, saw none. We found a speckled frog instead, unspooling a long gelatinous thread of black eggs in the water. Then fire ants, my feet a blaze of pain, a fumbling dance, and fact and memory began to stutter. What happened next? What curses did I utter? And how did I ever get back over the fence? I remember having a kind of reverence for the whole affair, the pity I got, each bite growing large and lustrous as a pearl, my tight and swollen toes. I must have liked the pain. What else would make me prod again, again, a whole week hobbling barefoot on the lawn, and still I missed the welts when they were gone. I should mention that's placed in this section of this book that's about divorce, sort of a stand-in for my ex-husband. Missed him, but he was like a, yeah. All right. So my most recent published collection is called Still Life with Mother and Knife. And it is a book, it is largely about girlhood and motherhood. There's a lot of poems concerned with art, high art, low art. I've got a sequence of poems that are in conversation with a painting by Eugene Delacroix, but I've also got Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are makes an appearance, the Berenstain Bears. So again, kind of pop culture, high culture. And the book opens with a quote that I'd like to read you. This is from the psychologist Bruno Bettelheim, who it's a book called The Uses of Enchantment. And Bettelheim was arguing, essentially he was arguing on behalf of reading the really gory old fairy tales to children, you know, the Grimm versions, right, with the, you know, chopping off the heels and things like that. Because he said that, you know, it gave the child is afraid to have these negative feelings for the parents, but it's safe to have negative feelings toward the ogres and the witches. Right? Okay. So here's the quote from Bettelheim. The child wonders who or what projects him into adversity, and what can prevent this from happening to him. Are there benevolent powers in addition to his parents? Are his parents benevolent powers? That last question kind of hangs over this book a little bit. There are some protectors who fail to protect, some abusive people. But one of the concerns of the book is postpartum depression. And when I was growing up, I sort of had one narrative, one idea of what postpartum looked like. You may think that this would be from, you know, Dateline or I don't know, don't know where, Newsweek articles or something. But it's actually my mother and my aunt talked extremely frankly about wanting to murder us when we were babies. So this is called, my family has a dark humor, but this is called Postpartum, a Fairy Tale. The pages of our storybook childhoods were ripped from the Brothers Grimm, the woods always in shadow, the apples poisoned, the ladders made of bone, our mothers telling us early how much they loved and loathed us, how my aunt had wished to find my cousin drowned in the washing machine, while my mother hoped her cat would climb the walls of my crib and steal my breath. Our longed for endings told gleefully and in the passive voice. Those days were gone, they told us, but we wondered. If, as Bettelheim writes, the witches and giants in the brutal fairy tales are really stand-ins for the parents the child is afraid to fear and love, what did we make of our mother's revelations, which made us the monstrous creatures, changelings left by trolls, that they could not or would not save us, that we had to learn to walk the woods alone? My poor mother. Actually, let me read this next poem, My Poor Mother. This is called Introduction to Home Economics. The first section of this book, all the poems are titled Introduction to something. And it's essentially an initiation into girlhood. So this one, Introduction to Home Economics. I'm not convinced my mother ever forgave me for carving, instead of the jack-o'-lantern, the hand she used to steady it in her lap. We sat on the porch with a kitchen knife, newspapers spread beneath us. The pumpkin skin was stubborn, my mother left-handed. I was 6, my mantra, let me try. Then blood, and blood, and blood. Then tourniquets of towels and the rush to the ER, my father driving. I stayed behind with a neighbor, my mother returning with black stitches, her hand wrapped like a mummy's to finish the face we'd started. Each Halloween, she brought it up again, reminding me what I had done, how I had hurt her, though she was the one who handed me the knife. So that's one of the mothers and one of the knives in the title of this book. My mother, my poor mother, but also she still makes me feel guilty about this. Years later, 44 years later. Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned, would you be interested in hearing a poem about a painting if you can't see the painting? Maybe. Okay. All right. So I mentioned there's an entire sequence in this book that is in conversation with Eugene Delacroix's paintings of Medea. She's a mythological mother who basically her husband left her for another woman, and to get revenge, she murdered their children. It's a wonderful Greek tragedy. And so warm and fuzzy. I was teaching a class on vengeance, a world literature class on vengeance, and I was reading the play. I was looking for PowerPoint slides. I came across this painting I hadn't seen before, and it just knocked me out. Really, really connected with it. And it turned into a whole sequence. I went to France and studied all of Delacroix's sketches. It's incredible. But anyway, I'm going to describe the painting. First half of the poem is going to describe the painting, and then there's a turn, sort of an inward turn, which you'll hear. So this is called Medea Furious, 1838. Furious Medea, Delacroix called her, but I can see no rage unless we count her breasts, twin weapons pointing fiercely at us, or the hand clenching a dagger, its shadow slicing her nearest child's leg. There is disorder in her hair and robes, but her face, caught in profile, reveals what we might read as sadness, a jaw too soft for anger. The painting's tension lies in the lack of fury, in the illusion that she might be guarding the boys, in our knowledge that she is not. And the children in her arms, they know it too. The one half-hugged, half-throttled squirms away. The other is folded in a pose so close to the surrender of nursing, he seems at peace almost, but for his eye, open wide and looking directly at us. How many times have I seen that look, the flash of fear on my young daughter's face when I have raged at her or some small thing? It passes, the fury and the terror. My daughter puts on socks, the driver yields, but I'm left shaken, a stranger. Maybe all mothers murder their children's innocence. In the painting, Medea holds her boys so close, they're one body again, two cords she must cut. The children have no choice but to love the hand that holds the knife. I'm going to read one more poem from this collection, and then I'll read a couple of new things. I always feel like I have to counter that one with something happier. So this is back to my daughter, who is great. She's 13 and a half. We love each other very much. I should mention, when I was in college, I worked part-time as an artist model. So this is referenced throughout the book, but in this poem. This is called In the Shower, My Daughter Studies My Naked Form. Her hair shampooed and rinsed, her eyes safe now to open. My daughter gazes on my body while I fight the urge to turn away. How hard it is to be held in the eyes of another. I used to pose for artists, hopeful one might find me beautiful and teach me how. But as they sketched, I looked out the window or over their heads, afraid to meet their eyes or see myself as I'd been rendered. They weren't looking at me exactly, but at shapes and shadows, at intersecting planes, and invention in an invented room. My daughter looks more closely than a painter. She rubs my ruined belly, pokes my hips. Soaping my knees with her small hands, she studies me the way I've stood before a work of art, examining those diaphanous bathers or some Dutch still life, lemons and fish on a platter, the ordinary gleaming, or the way I stand and watch her as she sleeps. So I think that gives you a sense of the book, this one. And so as Robin mentioned, I've been working on this odd book about houses, broken houses, which encompass everything from doll houses and model homes to infestations, like threats to home. So we've got a long poem about palmetto bugs, which nobody ever wants me to read because they're scary. And yeah, well, it's quite varied. But I'm going to read a few poems, not many. I have the entire manuscript up here because it's like a security blanket. I'm so pleased that it's finally finished that I carry it around with me. But I'm just going to read a couple of things. This is the first poem in the book. I was telling the workshop today that my family really looked at houses as sort of symbols of security and financial stability and sort of this way of moving up in the world. You can hear about that here. It's called Loved Houses. If I mapped my childhood, it would be dotted with houses my parents wanted to buy but couldn't afford. They pointed to them out of car windows, certain that this was the way that wealth was made. The cottage by the park in Jacksonville, they looked inside when they were newlyweds. A steal if they'd only had a down payment. A rundown studio on Ocean Drive before South Beach became, well, South Beach. And a dozen derelict low-rises on the bay my father swore would be worth a fortune someday if we only had the cash and the time. We didn't. He was right, of course, and still likes to say so. The worst lost house we never drove past. It sat on a slip of land in a Key West trailer park. My grandparents let my mother and father stay a few days there for a honeymoon, perhaps the one nice thing they ever did. And my father said then he'd buy it the minute they wanted to sell. They sold it in secret for less than it was worth instead, a grudge he still carries. In Key West, my mother wanted to tour the Hemingway house, but couldn't afford the tickets. So they looked over the wall, through the opulence of palms, at the arching windows and delicate balcony to imagine what wealth and luck might buy. I'm going to read a little bit of a longer poem that involves my grandparents again. This is a braided narrative, and so there are a couple of different stories at play. One of them you may recognize if you are a fan of Robert Redford movies. So this is called On the Lam. Every July, when I sat for an hour or so in my grandparents' dismal single wide, squeezed on the couch between my mother and father, my grandparents shouting questions at us, not waiting for our answers, I wondered if life was just a series of torments and obligations. My grandfather going to war, then working as a plumber all those years, only to land in Central Florida with nothing but the trailer, an RV and busted tires, and little crystal animals watching it all disintegrate from the shelves. My grandmother's cousin Forrest, meanwhile, was robbing banks in the 60s across the Southwest with a crew cops called the Over the Hill Gang. Now that would have given us something to talk about instead of whether I wanted to be a teacher or a stewardess, the only options Grandma could see for me, before she went back to screaming at her husband or my father, and I slipped off the couch to study the family portraits in the hall. There were my father's sisters, their boys, and me. My grandmother's cousin excelled at finding opportunities, marrying women under fictitious names, devising more elaborate escapes, 18 in all, from each new jail, rowing out of San Quentin in a kayak he built in the prison shop. As for my grandparents, they seemed to be on the lam from something too, way out there in the woods where we got lost each year, my parents arguing over my father's hand-drawn map. Those summers, I thought I suffered alone, my parents having pledged not to utter an unkind word about the trailer or the people inside it until I was 12 or so, old enough to hear the truth, or some of it. My parents left out the foster home, the worst of the beatings, the floor of the garage where my father slept beside the dogs, the rent they charged him to sleep there. And still we went, my father unable to loosen their hold, The way his mother's cousin kept robbing banks after he'd taken millions, as though he needed prison for life to make sense. You may have seen the movie about Cousin Forrest, Robert Redford playing him sexier and kinder than could have been possible. In a year or two, the feds would close in on him back in Florida. He'd be arrested again, then released, then rob more banks, and die in prison. So maybe the lesson is life is a series of disappointments, and then you die. Or maybe sometimes you die and an aging heartthrob buys the rights to your story. I think it's almost funny now, the way we huddled on that couch, counting the minutes until we could escape. Yet here I am again, probing the fights, the figurines, the awful smells, and the way my face smiled down from the cells of picture frames as though I were loved, as though I were happy there, or maybe waiting for the guards to turn their backs so I could run. In case you haven't seen it, the movie is called The Old Man and the Gun. And it's one of Robert Redford's, I think, last acting roles, maybe his last. And it is also, Forrest Tucker was the subject of a David Grann profile in New Yorker, also called The Old Man and the Gun, which I highly recommend looking up. It's fabulous. Just David Grann's a great writer. But I first learned about the bank robbing cousin through newspaper articles. My grandmother compiled a kind of memory book of her family. So here it was. Let's see. I think we're keeping this to about 7 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to hear a few more poems then? Okay. Haven't outstayed my welcome yet. All right. Okay. I am going to read then a poem that we talked about in the workshop this afternoon. We talked about going back to homes that we can't actually return to. So I thought I would share this. This is called Tear Down. When I led my husband to the street where I lived in a garage apartment my last year in college, I expected to find the place shabbier than I remembered. I'd seen it come up for rent, looking less cared for. But I wanted my love to know me, know all the versions of myself. So we walked from our downtown hotel, threading back and forth between businesses and offices, looking for the address I swore I knew. We'd almost given up when I saw the mailbox dismantled in the grass, the patchy driveway leading nowhere. When we turned in, we found the demolition notice, dated that week, hanging by rubber band from the branch of a tree. I couldn't shake the sense I'd let the place down by not returning sooner, the eerie sense that I was meant to find it here, like this, before the new construction could begin. What were the odds of arriving to find it razed? I hadn't been there in 20 years and never really thought I'd find my way inside again. But secretly, I'd hoped for a for rent sign so we could peek in the windows without trespass at my former world, the black and white tile, the awkward kitchen, the glass doorknobs I loved. Instead, we walked a vacant perimeter, a plot so small it seemed impossible it ever fit a life, much less my own. And, okay, 2 more. This is the 2-poem warning. All right. We also, toward the end of the workshop, we started talking about ghosts and haunted houses. And so the house that I currently live in, when I moved into it, I don't know if it's actually haunted, but strange things happened. Strange things happened for quite a while. And one of the owners had recently died, and his wife had moved, left. So we used to joke that the former owner was there sort of looking around going, who are you people? Right? It's called The One About the Haunted House. At first, the jokes we made about the ghost were jokes, our way of laughing off the lights that turned on by themselves in empty rooms, and the pictures that kept falling from the walls. Neither of us believed in ghosts, but we named ours Bobby, after the former occupant. Oh, that's just Bobby, we'd tell our dinner guests when the range hood fan began its frantic spin. We'd explain how it all could be explained. Faulty wiring, shoddy nails, and besides, he didn't die here, but in a nursing home. We didn't believe in ghosts, but by all accounts, ours was a kind man when alive. We learned he'd been married once to a local politician not known for being kind, And the haunting, if it was a haunting, seemed less malevolent than bewildered. Neither of us believed in ghosts, then things got louder and stranger. And the problem of our not believing seemed smaller than the problem of the ghost we didn't believe in. And though I felt ridiculous, I bought crystals and Googled exorcists and tried to keep the fear out of my voice in front of our daughter. It was a joke that sent him packing. My husband shook a fist at the ceiling and threatened to call the ex-wife if he acted up again. And just like that, the noises stopped. Our cups and plates no longer flew off the shelves, and his leaving became a kind of punchline, though I felt a little guilty no one missed him. Once I was certain he was really gone. He did come back for a little while, but he's gone again. It's quiet. Thank gosh. All right, I'm going to close on a poem. Just being in this space with writers and lovers of books and literature, and just such an active poetry society is really wonderful. Warms my heart. So I wanted to read close on a poem that is about another place in the same vein for me, and it's the library. This is called The Returning to My Childhood Library. I wrote this, I was commissioned to write a poem for the reopening of a library in Georgia. And so this is not in Georgia, but it's in Miami. After 30 years and renovations, this feels a little like getting lost in a book. The outside world blurring and falling away, but still there at the edges of the page. That is, I'm here, watching my daughter run a hand across the spines of juvenile fiction, and I'm a child again, my mother steering me towards circulation because I can't see over my tower of checkouts. Some things have changed, of course. The wooden card catalog's gone, replaced by a bank of computers where a young man is studying and or shopping for shoes. And the bookshelves are shorter. But there's the community room, home of magic tricks and story hours. And over there are the windows I sat beside, reading on rainy afternoons. A boy sits by them now, practicing phonics with his mother. Shh, spa, sm, she says, and he repeats in the quiet. And they begin building words together. Ship, spell, small. And though we have at least a dozen books at home from our own library, my daughter sneaks another one onto the stack her grandmother cradles, and I let her, because I want to stay here forever, making my own small mountain of books. Behind me, all those tentative consonants, the soft sounds of someone learning to read. Thank you. Thank you for being here with me.
Yeah.
Run over. You might have been nervous when I walked this giant stack of.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Jackie. This has been nice, and it's only just beginning because we have some real food. You have sandwiches rolls and fruit, and all the water you can drink. And that's about it. I hope you stay around and talk. It's going to be a fun little reception. There are books for sale. Both of our poets have brought books if you're interested. And we got so much to talk about. We can talk about ghosts. We can talk about libraries. We can talk about houses. And anyway, thank you for being here. This was it still is going to be a great night. So let's all enjoy the reception.
Yeah, they're my